I was teaching a guitar lesson a few weeks ago, and right in the middle of it, my adult student stopped me. And he said, "Hey, Branner, I know that you know what you're doing. I trust you implicitly, but I would love to learn more about your teaching philosophy and your method because it feels like we're jumping all over the place." And I was, for a moment, taken aback by that question. But then what flowed out of me was this extemporaneous explanation and unpacking of the philosophy and the method that have grown inside me and through me over the last 25 years or 30 years of teaching guitar and teaching music and studying music. And that conversation really stuck with me. Welcome to the 440. I'm your host, Eric Branner, and today I want to talk about something I realized after nearly 30 years of teaching music. I don't really care if my students become good guitarists, at least not in the way you might think. Let's get into it. What's your teaching philosophy? Describe your teaching method. We don't think about it a lot, or maybe we do. I didn't, but it's in there, and it's really worth thinking about and talking about and fleshing out and knowing about yourself. When you ask someone, what's your teaching philosophy? Often they'll answer with what method they use, what methodology they use. And they're related, but they're not the same. Your teaching philosophy, it asks why. What do I believe about students? What do I believe about music education? What constitutes success for my students? What is my role as a teacher? What is your role as a student? What do I believe about human musical potential, learning, creativity, and artistry? The method says, what are we going to practice? What sequence will we use? What repertoire will we choose? How will we develop our technique? How will I structure this lesson? How will I solve this particular problem a student is having in the studio, in their lesson, on their musical journey? The philosophy that we carry as music teachers is what informs our method. And I think it's really interesting to break those two things apart, is to understand this is my teaching philosophy. And my method is flexible and in service to my philosophy. And that's why my teaching philosophy, when I was asked about it, it became very clear that I don't really teach so much from a curriculum. I teach for a student. I build my method around each student, which can make it feel like it's all over the place and it's very in the moment and could feel like I'm a flibbertigibbet. But I actually have a mindful process behind what I'm doing. There is structure, there is preparation, there are goals. But to me, the student is what matters more than the method. That's the core part of my philosophy. And when I think about my teaching philosophy and what I care about, it really, well before we discuss pedagogy or theory or which methods I like, it all comes down to the fact that I love music with every ounce of my being. I have since I was born. I wanted to play guitar from the time I could remember thinking. And it is something that has been such a gift to me to build my community and to give me purpose and to give something to pass on to other generations, to devote my life to studying. And I'm so grateful for that. I just love music. I love to study it. I love to hear about new artists and new works. I can't stop talking about it, and I love sharing it with other people. So helping another person begin their journey with music is a great joy in my life. And to me, teaching music isn't mostly about transferring information or knowledge or a how-to. It's really selling the people that I'm working with, my students and their families, on adopting a musical and a creative life. That's my purpose. That's my philosophy behind teaching. And being a guitar player, choosing the guitar as a core instrument really suited me because of how many ways studying guitar can be interpreted and how many methods one can go about learning it. And I think if you imagine about what being a guitarist is, well, I could be a classical guitarist, a jazz guitarist, a rock guitarist, blues, bluegrass, flamenco, Hawaiian slack key, fingerstyle folk. There's so many traditions that have fallen into guitar. And on my journey, I fell in love with most of them, got pretty good at a handful of them, and some I shied away from. Each one not only has a different technique and history and culture and style, but often they have different instruments. You have three main kinds of guitars: the electric, the steel string acoustic, and the classical. But they also have their own culture, right? They have their history, they have their heroes and their personality, their luminaries, their repertoire, what pieces people study, their techniques, the aesthetics behind them, and the vocabulary and the pedagogies. And in guitar, it's very common for practitioners not to ever know how to read music, right? A lot of the greatest guitar players we think of when we think of, oh, great guitar players, they didn't read music. They didn't write music. They played it in a different way. And of course, it's also awesome to read music and to be able to play off the page and to sight read. But that's why I think guitar was so interesting to me in developing my philosophy, is because it fit with this. I could meet with a student and get a feeling like, wow, this person needs structure in their life, or this person really needs expression in their life. This person needs creativity to be able to create something. And so all these different traditions, all these different styles have really fit right into my philosophy of teaching, of developing the human, of developing the community, of selling the cultural lifestyle. And the great thing that I've realized, because I've had about 1 billion guitar teachers, but one of the great things I've realized is that all these different traditions that we could study, classical, speed metal, whatever, bluegrass, is that they all have a different pedagogy, way that they're often taught. And one of my most favorite is Hawaiian slack key guitar, where a Hawaiian slack key guitar lesson, when you think of Hawaiian music, the way that's often taught is the teacher will say, just push, press, push, meaning watch my fingers and push down the strings, what I'm doing. I love that. I love that pedagogy. But the takeaway from this is that no discipline or tradition has a monopoly on the musical truth of how to play the guitar. So what you're deciding to study, what path you're taking, what genre you're studying, becomes a real open pathway of possibilities and opportunities, and it's so much fun. So again, it comes back to me feeling that the student that I'm working with matters more than the method that I'm teaching them. Who are they? Where are they in their life? What do they need? And that's my philosophy as a teacher, is trying to dig in and to understand how I can best serve them in that moment. Who is the student in front of me? I know that people learn differently. They learn at different rates. They have different histories. They have different bodies and hands and postures. They have different strengths. They have different anxieties and fears. They've got different tastes. They have different goals and dreams and ambitions. But the first step is trying to find this genuine person, this person that I'm talking to, trying to see through whatever anxiety or posturing that they're doing, but preparing myself to connect with the human student sitting in front of me and to teach that person. When I'm preparing lessons, I'm preparing tools and methods and ideas to support and buttress my observations in the moment. What's happening right now? Is the student engaged? Are they leaning in? Are they spacing out? Is there resistance? Are they feeling really excited and feeling like they're really motivated? Are they leaving the practice space with a lot of energy? And this is where we have to abandon what maybe worked for us, what our teachers in college taught us, and finding what's the just right, skillful thing to bring into this moment. Growth mindset is something I teach to all of my students. What is growth mindset? Growth mindset is the idea that we can keep learning. Pioneered by Carol Dweck. She wrote a great book on it, did a lot of research on the topic. Growth mindset is understanding that we're on a journey and we can learn and we can improve. So when you have a new student come into your studio, especially if maybe they've been playing for a while, is this idea you'll hear, I can't do this. I'm not really musical. I don't have great rhythm. My fingers aren't really capable of doing that. I'm too old. The first thing to apply to that type of energy is teaching growth mindset and adopting it in every aspect of their life. Is that what you can do right now is not a verdict of what you are capable of becoming. If you can change your mind to believe that you can get better, that's what a growth mindset is. And it's very powerful because it makes your journey so much more joyful, so much less shameful to say, gosh, I'm no good at this right now. I just started doing this thing. But to believe, oh no, I'm just on my journey. I'm getting better. That's the difference. The thing that sets people apart from people that do things and that don't, because every journey is difficult and every journey starts not knowing what you're doing. This applies to me so much because I always wanted to be a guitar player. I knew that. But on my journey, I had to play piano for 3 years before I could get a guitar. And I was very young. And my grandfather was a concert classical pianist. And the deal was if I needed to play piano for 3 years, then I could get a guitar. And after 2 years, I wasn't into piano. It wasn't my instrument. And I remember sitting at a recital that I was getting ready to perform, and my grandfather was there. I was young, but I realized I'm no good at this. This isn't my thing. And I knew that he was awesome. And I didn't play. I just sat there and cried. And I said, I'm done. I'm not playing anything. In that moment, I decided not to play an instrument. And it wasn't until a few years later, when I was maybe 12 or 13, that I finally got a guitar. And from the moment I got the guitar, I was starting the instrument late, which I knew. But I loved it so much, and I was totally fine not being good at the guitar because I wanted to do it so much. I had a growth mindset for that because of how much I was interested in the instrument. And that carried me a long way. And also, I didn't start playing classical guitar until I was 18. I realized by the time I was 25 or 26 that I probably wasn't going to reach the level necessary to win major competitions. I had become an amazing guitar teacher. I was a good classical guitar player. I am a good classical guitar player. And I was really great at teaching because I was so close to the experience of learning and to how that works and to having a growth mindset and just trying to get better each day. A massive part of my philosophy in teaching is teaching people to adopt a growth mindset and to enjoy that journey of learning. Adults are the most interesting students because they come into the studio with a preconceived idea. I'm probably too old to play. I know that you have to be a kid to learn how to do this. And I've always told myself I wanted to learn an instrument. I love teaching adults. I've experienced great success with teaching adults because I believe differently. Yes, small kids have a much more flexible, pliable brain and hands to be able to pick these things up. That's life. But what changes? By the time we're an adult, you're a great problem solver. You have life experience. You have developed abstract thinking. You also have self and situational awareness. I can teach you how to optimize your practice time. If you do these things, if you develop a proper technique, if you work on appropriate repertoire, if you use certain principles to the way that you learn and that you study, you will make great progress and you will grow and you will learn. And in a couple of years, you'll be able to play. Let me teach you how to learn. How am I going to apply this skill? When am I going to ease off this piece that we've been working on or this song we've been working on or this skill and try one that's a little bit easier or push in and try one that's a little bit more difficult? Again, it comes back to finding the right challenge for the right moment as part of the method. To me, one of the most important elements of that philosophy is the concept of deliberate practice, teaching people how to practice and how to learn. Many of you have probably read the book Peak by Anders Ericsson. It's a work on deliberate practice and the science behind learning I love this because my best friend was a professional tennis player, and we met when he was at the University of Washington, and I was his neighbor as a young aspiring guitarist and guitar teacher. And I started going to all of his tennis matches, and he started coming to my guitar competitions and shows, and we became really close, and we realized there's a real similar through line between both of our worlds, how he was learning and practicing tennis, how I was learning and practicing my instrument and performing, and the mindset behind this and the discipline behind what we did and how we spent our time. That's what brought us together. And so the concept of deliberate practice is the idea of having expert instruction where you are given the just right challenges for what you need in that moment. That's why I jump around a lot in my lesson. I feel the energy that's happening when I'm with a student. Oh, this seems too easy. They seem bored. Oh, this seems too hard. This is frustrating. They're not practicing. So what I want to do is I want to give them the right challenge and to encourage them through that challenge and to give them feedback. And most importantly, when someone asks me about my teaching philosophy, at the core of it all is I say, how well are we improving? Are we seeing growth? If we're not, then it's not working, right? It's one thing to say, I'm just enjoying this. I do this because I want to do it. But for me as a teacher, it's really important to know that my students are developing and that over time they're making progress. So after I had this lesson, I posted to our Facebook group, Vaughn's Family. The responses to that when I shared this story were amazing. And some of them were so great and worth sharing. And one is a friend of mine named Nate Terepka. He's this great teacher. And he brought up this idea, this is great, all this optimization, all these things you know, but the most essential thing is joy in making music. That's my teaching philosophy. And when he shared that, it really jumped out because once you express joy and bringing the joy of making music as my philosophy, then suddenly that is the gateway to so many beautiful things of being playful, of remaining curious, of improvising, and playing because you want to, of leaving a lesson, dying to go home and practice again, and looking forward to that next lesson the following week, even if maybe you're not fully prepared, just to be able to do that thing for yourself. And when I think about that idea in my studio, I realize that so much of my teaching isn't just about playing music. It is about learning how to have conversations and look people in the eye and ask questions and be curious. I have a pet peeve. It is a pet peeve of mine when someone just happens to realize, well, music stopped being good in 1992. It didn't. You stopped being open to new music in 1992 because you graduated from college and you got a job. This is the truth. This is how we hear it all the time. And I think that it's something that's a choice. And it's a choice we fall into. But as a teacher with the philosophy of serving the whole person, of trying to make their life more creative and cultured and expressive, there's no better gift than you can give them than to have this conversation, especially with adult students and surely with your high school and college students. Don't stop listening to new things. Don't stop seeking new things. Don't stop trying new things. If you want to try classical guitar, do it, even if you've been playing jazz forever. Don't be afraid to follow that curiosity. One of my last pieces of my philosophy that we haven't discussed so far about how I like to approach a student is the idea of the practitioner versus an artist and what we're trying to develop. And what I mean by that is I can take pretty much any kid and pretty much any adult, and I can make them a competent practitioner over time, right? To where they can play notes, they can read okay, their sound actually will impress their friends, right? They'll hear me like, wow, that sounds pretty good. They're great accomplishments. But that doesn't necessarily indicate growth as an artist. And that's something that I think we need to teach our students and our parents and our people around us, is that there is a huge difference between able to push the buttons or push the keys or create a tone and being creative, being an artist. An artist is someone who's completely present within themselves and comfortable being authentic. When you think of watching Yo-Yo Ma play or listening to Kurt Cobain sing or Jimi Hendrix play guitar? Or how about Bob Dylan singing? Is he a great singer? I think so, because of what a great artist he is. These are all very different musicians and they're very different traditions. The piece that they're conveying is that they are artists. They are communicating. And so artistry isn't just something you earn at the end of completing a book or a method. A beginner can begin practicing artistry. Can you listen? Can you make a creative choice? Did you mean the phrase that just came out of your hands? Did you like it? How did it make you feel? What did you notice? What are you even trying to communicate in this piece that you're playing? And so a critical piece of my philosophy is on day one of teaching a student, we're talking about what it means to be an artist and what it means to be a practitioner. And of course, we want to be able to do both of those things and bring them together. But if there was one thing that was most important to me for what I use the vehicle of teaching music for, it's to develop the person into a creative, expressive artist. That's my goal. That's what I see as success. Another friend from our group, Ann Catherine Davis, who is such an incredible teacher and human being and expert on teaching philosophy and music learning theory, and just she's got so many great things to offer. But she had this great concept about her philosophy that I really loved, is that she believes music is already inside everyone, right? And her idea of music education is drawing something out rather than putting something in. And she speaks Latin, of course she does. And what she's talking about is, in Latin, educate, or the root of that, is the idea of leading or drawing out of a person. And that is her central focus, is as opposed to this is me developing this thing in you, it's drawing out something that's already there. And also gave the idea of fons, which is the well, which is what fons came from, fountain, spring, source. Little side note, but I really appreciated that, is that the teacher is not teaching an empty vessel. The teachers bring the knowledge, the technique, the theory, the experience, the feedback, all these things, but the artistic identity isn't the teacher. The identity is to be drawn and exposed and encouraged, and that is what education is to Anne. I thought that was such a lovely way to think about what we do. That's music already exists in everyone. It's my job to develop it, to uncover it, to expose it. At the end of all this, and after all this reflection and a few weeks of thinking about it and writing about it, I realized that as a guitar teacher, I don't really care if you become a good guitarist, but it's not entirely true. I do care about my students being able to play, and technique absolutely matters, and sound and rhythm and craft and skill. Those things are all important to me, especially as they make their way into the world. I want them to be great practitioners. But for me, that's too small of a definition of success. I have had students become professional musicians and play in symphonies and tour the world. That's great. I've also had students who have become engineers and school teachers, athletes, lawyers. And am I more proud of that than something else? No. My teaching philosophy and what I'm most proud of is that my students tend to become interesting, caring, curious, engaged, well-balanced adults. That's the thing that matters most to me, is that this tool of learning music is a conduit for them becoming curious, caring, interesting, engaged adults. And so if you boil all that down into what my teaching philosophy is, it's really 5 ideas. It's that, yes, we will develop a technique that will expand what you're capable of doing. Musicianship that we will learn, that's going to expand what you're capable of hearing and how you're able to experience the world around you. The culture that we're studying, that's what expands what you're capable of experiencing in your life and tasting and seeing and savoring and walking through. And practice gives us discipline, but also expands what we're going to be capable of accomplishing. And then at the end of all that, it's artistry. What are you capable of becoming and expressing? Why are you developing this skill and this ability? How are you going to share your authentic truth with the world around you? Those 5 things: technique, musicianship, culture, practice, and developing the artist. Awareness of who we are and what we can do, that comes before the expression. And if we're getting philosophical here, I think so much of being an artist is being able to listen and noticing and seeing what's beautiful, what's hideous, what feeling does this elicit, and then caring enough to develop a craft to be able to express that. That's just so cool. And when I heard myself saying all these things that I've just been riffing on over the course of maybe 7 minutes, this is what came out. This was my answer to my student, which is, yes, I absolutely want to give you this technique and show you what I'm doing and show you how to do it and prove to you that I'm an expert teacher. But also, I am listening to you as a human and being very aware of where you are on your journey as a human. How can I mold all these things together into a path that's energetic and exciting and motivating and sensitive to your frustrations and your strengths, where you're going to want to come back every week and you're going to want to practice and you're going to want to remain a learner. And maybe it's not guitar. It's the same principles that you would learn to play guitar or learn to play tennis or to go to med school. It doesn't matter. These are principles that we can bring into life. We can be an artist away from the instrument. And the most important part of artistry, we do away from the instrument. In closing, maybe my greatest hope isn't for all of my students to become world-class guitarists. My greatest hope is for my students to become more curious, more attentive, more expressive, more loving, better adjusted human beings, more comfortable with difficulty, more open to beauty and culture and exploring new things. I'm always going to be teaching the student in front of me, not the music first. You've been listening to the 440 Podcast. If you found this helpful, subscribe at Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a quick rating. It makes a big difference. To learn how to run your studio with less stress and more joy, visit makemusic.studio.com. I'm your host, Eric Branner.